Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our first keynote speaker, researcher and professor of finance and business economics at the University of Southern California, Nik Bhatia.
It's a pleasure to be here in Austin, and I thank the Texas Blockchain Council for having me. It's a real honor to speak in front of you guys today. My talk today is called Bitcoin is an American Ideal. Natalie mentioned that Bitcoin is not a partisan issue. It's not Democrat or Republican. It is American in a very unique way. Bitcoin represents innovation, freedom, ingenuity, and a lot of values that we hold dear in this country. Now, when I first found out about Bitcoin, I became completely obsessed with it because I identified it as something that I could channel an optimism through. And in the United States of America, when we're in such a divided era, having something that can unite us is powerful. And I believe that Bitcoin is that uniting force that can bring us together and move our society into the future in a more unified way. Now, Bitcoin was invented by an anonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. But Bitcoin, to me, became American essentially right after it started. This is Hal Finney. Hal Finney was the second person to ever use Bitcoin after Satoshi. He was the first person to receive a transaction. Satoshi sent him 10 Bitcoin as a test, generous test in today's terms. He was also the first person to mine Bitcoin. He, in his own words, Hal Finney mined block 70-something. So he was the first person after Satoshi to mine. And Hal Finney was a Californian. And so, to me, Bitcoin became American basically right after it was born. Because the first transaction was received by an American. Now, Hal Finney was a computer scientist, a cryptographer, and he was someone that believed in using encryption software to advance privacy and sovereignty for the individual. Now, when Hal Finney dedicated his life, to the early Bitcoin protocol, he felt that it was his responsibility to give Satoshi feedback. What are the bugs? What can we fix, and how can we make this better? Because he believed in it. Now, did Hal Finney, at any point during that beginning era of Bitcoin, feel that he had to check in with his government to see if it was okay to use Bitcoin? Not in the least. Because Bitcoin is just a software. Can you imagine the US government saying, you can't play that video game? It's unthinkable. And Bitcoin is not a video game necessarily, but it is a software just like any other video game. And to prevent us as Americans from using that software, or even to hint that it is restricted activity, is very un-American. And in my opinion, I believe that at no point did Hal Finney think, I probably shouldn't be doing this. No, he went with a freedom-forward attitude, and I'm going to use this software, and I'm going to help it grow, and I think that it can help the world. Now, Bitcoin, thankfully for Hal and the early users, had a very strong legal precedent in the United States. In 1999, the U.S. Court of Appeals Ninth Circuit issued a ruling that protected encryption software from undue restriction. The ruling said that restricting the use of encryption software, cryptography, like Bitcoin, this is before Bitcoin, burdens scientific expression, and it would also be a prior restraint on speech that offends the First Amendment. The ruling also said that cryptography and encryption software is the same thing as mathematicians using formulas and models to express their own scientific expression. So if we think about Bitcoin as this encryption software that is protected under the First Amendment, we can see why it is an American ideal. Freedom of speech is not partisan at all. It's something that we treasure here in the United States. And so when I think about the power that Bitcoin has to affect that, it tells me that Bitcoin is something that places itself right up on the First Amendment. I mean, one of the first things that we believe in as Americans. Now, I do believe that Bitcoin and America go hand in hand. This idea that Bitcoin threatens the United States, I think it's quite silly, especially when you think about the entrepreneurship that can come out of this country if we embrace these new technologies. Where are people going to start businesses? Texas. Where are they going to invest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin vehicles? United States, under our property law. Where are they going to build all these software applications for Bitcoin, blockchain technology? They're going to build them here in the United States. Now, today I want to talk about leadership, because TBC is showing leadership. The state of Texas is showing leadership when it comes to Bitcoin. But I think that we can take that to the next level. I believe that there are 4 sources of leadership that we should focus on here in the United States. Now, I believe that jurisdictional arbitrage is one of the most powerful forces that we have in this world. Jurisdictional arbitrage is this idea that if something is illegal in location A, I will move to location B where it is legal. Now, Texas is embracing this idea of jurisdictional arbitrage. They are passing laws that make Bitcoin and blockchain business friendly. And I believe that Texas is showing us what can happen in other states and what can happen at the federal level. So we see, the recent news out of China that China has banned Bitcoin mining, or they have severely restricted Bitcoin mining. The amount of hash power or mining power dedicated to the Bitcoin network dropped off rapidly after this ruling. And what did we hear right away? The miners are coming to Texas. This picture is from Inner Mongolia, where Bitcoin mining is very coal intensive. And this is a picture from the new Rockdale location Bitcoin mining facility, a beautiful facility actually, here in Texas. Now, Bitcoin mining coming from China to the United States, because it's now illegal in China, is only one small example of the power of jurisdictional arbitrage. So how do we make jurisdictional arbitrage work for us? Passing laws that are friendly to Bitcoin blockchain technology. Our friend Lee Bratcher, who has hosted us today, told me that TBC is working on a law for the 2023 legislative session in Texas that would make Bitcoin on par with gold in the eyes of the Texas comptroller. Now, in 2015, Texas passed a law that started the Texas Bullion Depository. This is a way for Texans to keep their gold in Texas instead of in New York or in some Wall Street vehicle. Now, was Texas's intention at the time to replace the US dollar as their currency? Absolutely not. That wasn't why they did this. They did this because they believed in a degree of sovereignty that had to be given back to the people of Texas. If you want gold, you can have gold and you can keep it here in a legal framework. I believe the Texas Blockchain Council is going to make Bitcoin on par with gold at the Texas Comptroller so that it can be paid, so that property taxes can be paid in Bitcoin. And whether it happens in 2023 or a later year, that doesn't matter. What matters is the leadership here. Showing the world, not just the rest of the 49 states, but showing the whole world that Bitcoin is money. It is money like gold is. And if you want to keep Bitcoin, it is your right to. And you should be able to keep it in Texas under some sort of legal framework that is protected from a property law perspective. So I'm very optimistic about this, and I hope to see great things from the Texas Blockchain Council in their efforts over the next couple years. The House bill that they passed earlier this year was an incredible display of leadership again. It defined virtual currency, and it also changed the Uniform Commercial Code to make Bitcoin and other associated technologies viewed as a legal thing. Now, there's so much confusion that surrounds Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, that for Texas to come out and attempt to define it really shows the difference between where Texas is today and where the federal government is today. One example of this is a notice that was issued by the Texas Department of Banking to its member banks earlier this year. When I read the letter in preparing for this talk, it actually blew me away. I was shocked at how accurately the Texas Department of Banking is describing this new idea of Bitcoin custody. Now, if a bank keeps your Bitcoin for you, they can do it in two ways. They can take the Bitcoin from you, meaning you have to send it to them, and then they keep it. They have their own private key, and it's basically a deposit for you. Or they can keep a copy of your private key, meaning that you still have the Bitcoin, but they have a backup for you. Now, in this letter, the Department of Banking said, we will allow the customer to retain direct control over their virtual currency, or we will cause the customer to transfer their digital currency to us, and we will keep it for them. This shows competence. It is a coherent policy, and it shows foresight. These are things that are not present in the federal legislation. Sorry? Mike? So, I'll just speak really loud. Here we go. So, at the federal level, we have the IRS, which has said that Bitcoin is property. We have the CFTC, which said that it's a virtual commodity. We have the SEC that said it's not a security. But there is no coherent message that we're getting from Texas. So I want to see the United States lead as well. Come up with a coherent policy. We don't want to lose businesses to Switzerland and Singapore because we don't have a coherent policy at the federal level. Texas and its efforts have to pressure the federal government to respond. We can't have 49 other states and the federal government all lagging behind while businesses are moving abroad. So we need banking leadership so that banks can de-risk Bitcoin as well. Bitcoin right now is legal to use in the United States, but still banks are preventing customers that have Bitcoin businesses from doing business with the bank. They say, if you're going to have a Bitcoin associated business, we don't want to work with you. And that needs to change. We need leadership from banks, not just in Texas, but around the country. The last source of leadership is from the Fed. Now, this is a more controversial topic, but I believe that the Fed needs to launch their central bank digital currency, which has been named FedCoin informally. And I believe that FedCoin, it doesn't threaten Bitcoin or pose any threat to this whole blockchain technology wave that we are going to, but it actually puts banks in a very tricky position. Because if people have FedCoin, what are they going to need their bank deposits for? What are they going to need Venmo for? So the Fed has to lead here and show that we need a digital currency so that we can bring price transparency back to the dollar. The dollar is a very hidden system in the way that it operates. I believe that a Fed coin will bring some modicum of transparency back to the US dollar system. And it also puts banks on the spot, that banks need to respond to this new wave of technology. Right now, banks kind of have a free pass. You put your deposit at a bank, you're funding that bank's balance sheet without getting any return. And so as the virtual currency era progresses, Fed issuing the Fed coin, banks issuing stable coins, they will all coexist with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And America needs to have leadership from Texas, leadership from the United States, leadership from banks, and leadership from the Fed so that we can win the future. I will be signing books outside. My book is called Layered Money. I hope you guys will come see me, and thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.